So, we've had the summer break for Formula One, and there's been a heap of breaking news happening. And because I'm such a big legal dummy, big legal dum dum, I thought I'd better enlist some help, some much needed help. So, joining me, new friend of the show and mine, is the wonderful Lindsay. How are you, Lindsay?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
This crackdown on content creators and people with brand identities that they've been building themselves, sometimes recently, sometimes for a long time. You know, it's one of those things where I feel like I'm always behind the eight ball because I just am juggling so much in my life all the time. But I logged in and people were saying, you're probably seeing all your favorite content creators are changing their names today. And I was like, I hadn't seen that, but I've seen you reacting to that. So I guess now I'm clued in. So I'm always slow to this, but do you have any thoughts or memories of how that day played out when we logged in and the online space was changed?
I had started to see some rumblings for like probably a week or so before about people were talking about cease and desist letters, and it was all very ominous. And then I do feel like there was one day where it hit where everybody started to change their usernames and basically remove F1 or Formula One in any way, shape, or form from their online personas. And so, as I mentioned, cease and desist letters. Liberty Media was sending out letters to primarily monetized creators saying that they were going to be held liable for trademark infringement if they did not remove F1 or whatever iteration of that they had in their portfolios because they were using, or their portfolios profiles, because they were using F1 trademarks to build and profit off personal brands.
I mean, this happened, and I can remember it happening nearly 10 years ago where there was a huge stink about a crackdown on social media, cracking down on anybody whose name had Formula One in it. Everyone's name was changing from blank Formula One to blank Grand Prix or some more generic sort of title. I mean, it's hard to think back to what it was like 10 years ago, but this was before the teams were posting video clips and TikToks or whatever. No one had any access to anything that was happening in the paddock whatsoever. It was all completely a walled garden and everything. It was behind a big paywall because everyone was charging so much money. And they cracked down on it. And a few things were kicking around in the sphere at the time. One was that movie Rush, and then this big social media crackdown, and then all of a sudden, a few months later, oh, we're selling the sport to Liberty Media. And it's like, well, that at least that sort of makes some sense. So we went through that cycle, and now Liberty Media has been around for a little while. Maybe they want to keep running the sport for a long time. Maybe they are looking forward to some kind of sale. Maybe they just want to juice whatever they can in terms of monetization and partnerships and just fan dollars. Because this Formula One movie is so expensive, they want to like capitalize and maximize that. I don't really know. But there was a huge stink back then, the first time that I went through that kind of cycle of they're trying to shut down Twitter. There was Twitter back then. They
Yeah.
just want to shut down Twitter. They don't want Formula One on Twitter. They hate Twitter. They don't want anything to do with it because the sport's run by 80-year-olds. This time it doesn't feel quite like that, but it did take us a little while to go through the impact. Oh my God, my favorite creators are having to change. Oh my God, they're trying to rip the money out of my favorite content creator's pocket. And then after a couple of days, things calmed down. Everyone took a little bit of a breath and went, oh, it's maybe not as bad as we thought, but it is maybe not a good look for them. Is that sort of, I don't know what your read on that is, but is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think from a legal perspective, this is something that happens all the time. And I think as more time has passed, more people have been coming out. People who are early adopters in the content creation space are saying, I got a cease and desist from Liberty Media 2, 3, 4 years ago. So this is something that it has been happening. I think within the last year, we have seen content creation in the F1 space just blow up significantly. And so they probably just weren't able to stay on top of it like they were. And so they probably took some time to build up their list. And then we're just like, okay, we're going to do one massive campaign. And from a legal perspective, trademarks is one of those like weird things where if you don't enforce your trademarks against the small fish, which would be content creators in this case, you can't go out and enforce your trademarks against the big fish
Ah,
because
interesting.
if you have all hundreds of thousands of content creators, let's just say, using your trademarks online to build their personal brands, their use of that is essentially diluting the
Yep.
power of that trademark. So then when they go to enforce it against somebody else, they say, okay, sure, that's fine, but you've let X, Y, and Z people do it. So your trademark really has no value anymore. And I think that's the pickle that F1 found themselves in. And when you're going to enforce your intellectual property against someone, there's not really a nice way to do it.
No.
And so you also get mixed views from people who have gotten these letters as to whether they thought everything was very informative, respectful, and people who found them to be a little more hostile. And I think that is just a matter of personal perception. But I don't see there being another way to do it that would have been equally as effective, even though maybe it would have been nicer for it to happen in a different way. There
Yeah.
just really isn't another way. That's the problem.
A lot of people have been posting their deeply emotional, deeply unfiltered thoughts and feelings on videos on social media to say, FOM should have done this, Liberty should have done that. Why aren't they consulting with people? Why aren't they building connections rather than putting up barriers? Why aren't they looking to offer ways for content creators to do more official partnerships? If they're so supportive of content creators, why are they coming down so hard on us? Why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? There wasn't, in the immediate aftermath of this sort of peak action, there doesn't seem to have been a lot of acknowledgement of, well, they're sort of within their rights though. And they're sort of,
Yeah.
we were sort of the ones in the wrong here.
And I think that you can acknowledge that F1 needs to do more to embrace the content creator economy, but also recognize that you don't necessarily want F1 officially partnering with your favorite content creator. Because I had some conversations like offline with several other like content creators in the space, and we were just saying that people don't realize that if F1 is licensing out F1 or Formula One to your favorite content creator to use in their profile, then they have a say in what that person posts. You're going to lose the unfiltered aspect from that person because everything that they're going to be saying and doing online is going to have to go through F1. They're no longer going to be able to talk about IndyCar or Formula E because they'll have some exclusivity with Formula One. Like, you don't want F1 licensing their name out to your favorite creators because the quality of the content that you would get from that goes down. Does F1 need to do more with inviting creators to races or just giving creators access like creators can get at like IndyCar races? 100%. But I think that's a different conversation outside of the IP. And I think the IP has at least gotten people talking about that. But I think from the trademark side, it's best we all change our names and move on.
Yeah, and I mean, Liberty Media era has been great in terms of they did open the floodgates to that social media exposure. They understood the value of reaching their fans directly and and empowering the teams and drivers to do the same thing. Doesn't matter if you're in the paddock. Go and film a TikTok if you want. That's fantastic. I mean, I would even argue maybe that the things have swung too far that way, where instead of getting insights about the races, we have to watch the drivers, name their favorite ice creams or play games. It's turning into like the sort of the James Corden show a little bit too much, in my opinion. But the other thing that's happened is Liberty Media is endorsing and through other media channels saying, well, now we are going to have YouTube highlights. We're going to have official podcasts. We're going to do all kinds of partnerships. I just see that there's this fundamental struggle that we have now and will probably go on and only get worse as media breaks down from being television rights to all kinds of ways that we interact with teams and drivers. And the more Liberty Media engross themselves into those different channels, and the more the content creators are living side by side with them on those same channels, these problems maybe they might not get worse, but they're not going to go away entirely.
Unfortunately, we're still at the spot where any sort of collaboration between content creators and F1 comes at the team level. It's the teams that are inviting creators to the paddock. It's the teams that are going out and trying to do these special marketing campaigns with their sponsors and different content creators. So we can only hope that as that continues to grow, that maybe F1 will say, okay, we need to get in on this, but you never know. You mentioned the F1 movie, and I don't think that is insignificant, especially considering they gave Brad Pitt the license to name the movie F1.
Oh, yeah. They're deeply involved.
And not just like name the movie F1, the F1 logo with the registered trademark.
It's absurd.
So I don't think it's a coincidence that that movie's coming out in about a year and they're trying to tighten up the strength of their trademarks and IP rights. And I think most people have come to recognize, oh yeah, maybe the two might be related.
Almost to the letter a year, which it
Yeah,
has.
and
It
I'd
just
imagine they're going to start ramping up their marketing, all of that
yeah.
very soon.
Well, if they're going to sell T-shirts with Brad Pitt's photo on them or whatever, like I mean, they're not going to want those T-shirts to sit next to someone like me who just designs a T-shirt with Daniel Ricciardo's name and face on it and competing for those dollars, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I don't want to be too tinfoil hat and make too much of that, but I'm sure we're going to see all kinds of Sunny Hayes merch and everything under the sun that there
Yeah.
can possibly be.
And it
I had
wouldn't surprise me if the movie team said, hey, we're paying X amount of money to be able to use F1 as the
yes.
name. We better be getting as much value out of that as possible.
Yeah. One of the reasons I was so sort of I'd already wrestled with this because I'd had personal experience in the past of designing like a t-shirt and throwing it online and being like, aha, this is funny. And having someone send me a thing saying, you can't do that and take it down and it's wrong. And even though I felt like, well, the design I had done was like, it mentioned the driver's name, but it was sort of a bit more of a broader story. But because it mentioned the driver's name, that driver sent a message through to the people selling the shirts to say, you can't do that. And I was like, I'm not even interested in fighting this for the dozens of dollars that I make every year selling this shirt. But I mean, it was just like, fair point. Like, you are who you are. You've invested trillions of dollars in your brand, and I've invested basically nothing in mine. So, like, I don't even mind. It worries me when I mean, not it worries me, but it annoys me talking about going after the small fish. You can go to websites right now, those sort of upload a logo and print a sticker kind of websites where
Yeah.
someone just takes the Formula One logo, not even their own design, but just takes it and uploads it and sells it as a sticker for $4. That still seems to be online. So I would like to see
Yeah.
it go further down and get those really malicious people.
I don't even understand how that kind of stuff stays on these online shops. Like, I know before my dad and I went to our first F1 race a few summers ago, he didn't want to, like, he didn't like the F1 merch that was out there. So he's like, let me see if I can like design my own McLaren shirt on like one of those just
Yeah.
like screen printing websites and then like get my own like custom shirt. And they wouldn't print it for him because he had like the McLaren logo. So I don't understand how you can't do that. But then there's these Etsy shops
Yeah.
selling Ferrari, McLaren shirts with just like completely in the stylized font with the logos, all of that are still up and running. So that I'm not sure about. And I would like to think that that is going to be the next part of the crackdown if it hasn't been a little bit cracked down on a little bit already, but who knows?
I can understand people going, well, I made my own design. I drew this picture of Lando Norris or
Yeah.
whoever, and I just want to have it on a t-shirt. I kind of don't even mind that. I'm sure the drivers probably don't even care either, but it's when people basically just rip off official looking designs and put them on
Yeah.
a t-shirt, because
Yeah.
if you go to the driver's site or the team's site, it might be $120, but you could buy it on Redbubble for $30. And then somebody who ripped off that design makes several dollars. I mean, that's just, I mean, I know that there are sometimes automatic filters that are like looking for keywords, probably not scanning designs, although that may be coming. And people who are trying to get into that sort of SEO, if I just put the exact right keywords and label it the exact right way, McLaren fans will find my Lando Norris t-shirt and buy it. And it's just the official design. Those are the first people that I'd be going after, if anybody, and just scraping all of those sites, getting rid of all of that junk. Because then when you go to I mean, talk about working your way up. Then when you go to fabulous Formula One fans and say, hey, I'm sorry, but you can't have Formula One in your name. And look what we've just spent the last month doing is like scraping the bottom of the barrel to get rid of all the crud. Then it feels a little bit more justified.
One of the reasons they probably didn't do that is because most of the online merch problem isn't F1, it's teams, like we were saying. It's teams, it's drivers. Like, I don't think people, while there are people selling just like things with the F1 logo, that's not necessarily what most people are looking for when they go online trying to find cheaper F1 or team related merchandise. So I think that in terms of like what they perceived as a problem, that was probably more insignificant. And it's not their problem to enforce the trademark rights of the teams. It's not their problem to track down people selling Ferrari and McLaren merchandise online.
The other thing that I saw, which was part of the reaction to that sort of peak takedown activity, was it wasn't framed as they're going after content creators that are monetizing for FOM's registered trademark. It was never framed that way. It was always they're coming after content creators with Formula One in their name, which seemed to me like that was part of it. But the bigger part and the more accurate way of characterizing that was they're going after content creators that are in a way that's unofficial and illegally, monetizing their trademark. And by the time they go and engage a lawyer and send out a cease and desist letter, they're not going to just say, you can't have the name Formula One in your podcast and have ads in it. Please just change the name of your podcast. They're going to go through that whole brand identity and demand every little thing that they think they can get away with in terms of asking. That's why I didn't get asked to change my account and take Formula One out of it. And for now, I'm happy to keep it there. If I do get a letter, I'll just take it out. It's fine. But because I'm not really monetizing to that degree, it feels like I'm just not a target. So on the one hand, they seem to want to, like the people reacting to this sort of action were wanting to stir up the passions and say, look what they're trying to do. They're trying to silence us, all the fans and all the content creators who are just doing it for their own, for doing it for the passion, but they're trying to keep us down. They're kind of trying to oppress us. When really what was happening was we're just going, like, because you have a commercial thing going on here, probably the people who are getting to the point where they could subsidize their income quite handily, going after those people, but saying you have to take the big steps, but also all these little steps. And that was when it started to become more visible and probably hurt a bit more for those people too. Don't know, because it didn't happen to me. I don't know, but that was my impression.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't happen to me either, but I felt like I could not legitimately go online and talk about this in this way and the way that I did on TikTok and Instagram and Threads with F1 in my handle. So like just to maintain a sense of legitimacy, I was like, you know what, this is how it is. When I made my account, I didn't think that F1 was enforcing their trademark rights, which they weren't at the time, because there were already a ton of other content creators with F1 in their name. And so I looked at that and said, they don't care about enforcing their rights. It's kind of like a pack mentality. If they're letting everybody else get away with it, then sure, why not? And at that point, I had no idea whether that was going to be something I was doing for a month and just dropped it, or continued to do for it's been like a year and a half now. But yeah, I changed it more just because I would like to be monetized someday, but I was like, I can't talk about this with F1 being in my username. I need to make it more generic. But the people that have just like random, like their only presence on social media is like on Threads or Twitter, and they have F1 in their name, like that's not the people that F1 cares about. Maybe they are. Maybe attacking monetized creators was just the first step, but I think that was deliberate in a way that they kind of knew that it might have, like, to an extent, a trickle down effect to people like me who are at an intermediate level where they have a decent following, but they aren't monetized. So I really don't know whether it's something that they're going to continue to go after, but I think there was a bit of an overreaction from a lot of people who have nothing to be concerned about.
Yeah, probably. There's also, every content creator who is leveraging the Formula One trademarks is probably doing it to a different degree as well. So like I say, if you're selling a t-shirt that has the Formula One logo on it, that's one thing. If you are selling a t-shirt design that mentions Formula One but expresses something that isn't just infringing on a trademark, there are like cases where that's acceptable. And I'd fully admit that I don't totally understand that, but it's not to say you can't talk about Formula One. And I guess you could argue that a t-shirt design in some cases would be argued that that's a form of speech, right? The problem is you can't just represent it as you're just buying a Formula One t-shirt, you're just buying it from me instead of someone who owns the trademark. So there's shades of grey in between the extremes, right?
Yeah, fair use basically allows you to talk about Formula One and use Formula One trademarks in speech, commentary, written materials, all of that, and not get sued for trademark infringement just because you mentioned Formula One in an article that you wrote or a video that you post or a podcast that you make. That is kind of the crux of fair use in the trademark context. When you get into the t-shirts, I think it gets a little more gray, like if you have some sort of saying that has Formula One in it. But yeah, that is much more acceptable than, or much more likely to be considered a fair use than someone selling a shirt as if it's an official F1 shirt or using F1 to identify their personal brand like as a content creator.
Yeah, and that's to say as well, just to side with the content creators for 1 second, there are probably some people where it's a more of a black and white decision. You are actually genuinely infringing on trademark here. There's probably other cases, people who were sent cease and desist letters and had to take, corrective action on their side, where it was probably more murky and their use of Formula One was probably a little bit more, well, less directly infringy, to use that word. So
Yeah.
some of them who feel aggrieved, they probably have something of a reason to feel aggrieved.
Yeah, but I think overall it seems like for the most part, the community has kind of, I don't want to say come to their senses, but just process the emotion, let it subside. And as a whole, we are kind of moving on and also accepting the reality that most F1 content creators weren't just talking about F1 anymore. So when you think of it from that perspective, the rebrands to so and so motorsports probably makes sense because these people have been going to IndyCar races, they've been going to Formula E races. They're not just talking about F1 anymore, even though that was the niche that we all found ourselves creating in when we all first started.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, we're finding an equilibrium again in social media, and especially, I mean, I'm pretty much only on Threads, but everything is sort of correcting. And the people who were at first up in arms saying we're trying to be silenced and we won't have our names anymore, they're still around. And everyone's
Yeah.
saying, well, I put F1 in my username so that people found me. And it's like, well, maybe some of them did, but if it was as easy as that, everyone would do it and everyone would have 1 million followers. So it still falls back to those fundamentals of you have to be making good quality content that people want. And if you do that, they will follow you. Whether your name is blank Formula One or blank racing day enthusiast or whatever generic term you
Yeah.
land on. So the key remains for all the content creators out there, like us and like everyone else, you've still got to make good content at the end of the day.
Yeah. And you have to make the algorithm work for you. And that's not just
Yes.
about your name.
That's so much fun having to do that.
Oh, my favorite part.
Well, let me move us towards wrapping up here by flashing this on the screen. I believe this is your handle. Is this your new
Yes.
handle
This is
everywhere?
correct. This is my new handle everywhere. So Threads, Instagram, and TikTok.
Hopefully, we'll talk to you again soon, and hopefully, there's good legal stories to talk about maybe for a change next time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun.